Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our town hall meeting. Thank you all for joining us, and please continue sharing your recommendations for programs at communications@architects.org. We'll share this contact information again at the end of the program. I'm Eric White, Executive Director of the BSA. We all know that our world's been turned upside down responding to the virus. The situation facing us is ever-changing, and tonight we want to share the ways in which we are trying to support you during these times. We're going to begin by sharing updates on our work and then also engage in a virtual conversation with you about how we can help and try to address some of your ideas and questions. And before we begin, in case you haven't heard, Governor Baker today extended the stay-at-home advisory through May 18th. He has also created an advisory group to guide recommendations for reopening of business. For this and other information, please visit our website at architects.org. Now, this webinar is part of an ongoing series of town hall meetings that we're going to be holding this week, and the next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 30th at 8 a.m. We are offering 3 town halls this week in hopes that we can reach more people, knowing that both work and home life can be really difficult to make just one of these sessions. Some of this information will be similar, but of course, others will be joining us, and so some of the sessions will have some differences too. And while we continue to work on putting on programming that is relevant to you, I'd like to mention the opportunity to sponsor such programs, as well as our knowledge communities. These have been responsive to our times, serve the greater good of the AEC industry, and are continuing to reach hundreds of people at each session. Now, before we begin, just a few guidelines. For our question and answer period, we have selected a number of questions that were submitted ahead of time, and thank you for sharing these. Though we will not be able to address all the questions, we encourage you to share any that you might have during the webinar by using the chat and the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If the speakers are able to, they will respond. And otherwise, we'll continue to use these questions to inform our future programming. I also want to encourage you to join BSA Connect. This is a LinkedIn forum that we welcome you to join. It's meant to be a place where you can pose questions, share and find community outside of our knowledge communities and other BSA programming. You can find it by searching for BSA Connect on LinkedIn. During the meeting, we'll be prompting a few quick polling questions. The responses are anonymous, and we will send the responses live. This session will be recorded and posted in the next day or two on the COVID-19 resource page at architects.org. And I encourage you to continue to check our calendar of upcoming events, and including our calendar of knowledge community meetings. I'd like to acknowledge that because the pandemic is a rapidly changing and dynamic phenomenon, we are all trying to figure this out together. Our conversation today is not intended to provide definitive answers. There is no one size that fits all, but it is intended to support you with the information that we can all have to move forward together. And now I'm excited to introduce to you our panel for tonight. Natasha Espada AIA is the founder and principal of Studio ENÉE and is, of course, our 2020 BSA AIA president. Ted Touloukian AIA is the president and founder of Touloukian Touloukian, and he is the chair of the BSA Foundation Board of Trustees. And Jay Wickersham FAIA is a partner with Noble Wickersham and Hart, a design, construction, and environmental law firm, and he was our 2018 BSA AIA president. And tonight we're also joined by Jenny Effron, who is our policy director at the BSA. And so to begin tonight, let's turn it over to Jenny to kick us off with some information on our advocacy and policy initiatives that she's been working on. Jenny, are you there?
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Eric, and I hope everyone who's joined us is doing well this evening. I wanted to just give a quick overview of both the COVID-related work that we are doing in the policy arena and also the work that we are continuing to do that are part of our policy initiatives that we are continuing on both in a pre-COVID sort of thought train, and also moving forward with these policy initiatives in this as we emerge from COVID. So one of the things that we are doing is developing a case study of best practices for public meetings. This is a response to have municipalities have taken different paths towards holding public meetings, particularly as it pertains to development review. Some are not doing any, and some are regularly scheduled. And so we are putting together best practices for what we've seen towns doing and what partner organizations have recommended as well, that we can share with municipalities, with our members, and with the development community. We are also continuing our work in affordable housing. We have a 2-year housing fellow, Wandy Pasquale, that we share with Boston's Housing Innovation Lab. She is working on a future decker housing workshop and virtual exhibition that will explore the iconic triple-decker housing typology and think about the ways in which we would live now and the ways we would want to live in the future for affordable housing that is neighborhood contextual and dense, but not as dense as some of the larger developments that we see. Under climate adaptation, we are working with the Green Ribbon Commission and the Boston Environment Department to collect case studies on zero emissions retrofits in order to help guide the city on some of their policies, and also to share with our community for best practices that they could use going forward. Finally, I wanted to share that in our urban planning realm, we continue to work with Boston Main Streets and the City of Boston Patio Cafe pilot program, where we are assisting small businesses out in the neighborhoods to design and permit outdoor public cafes, which I think once restaurants reopen will be particularly important, both for the community and for these businesses who certainly will see a difference in their occupancies. Along with that, we are working with the city to ease the permitting process for public realm improvements so that they're more accessible and equitable throughout the city of Boston. So that's what we're working on so far, and I'm happy to speak with anyone more about that and go into greater detail. But I'd like to turn it now to our 2020 BSA President, Natasha Espada.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm currently working on 4 BSA task forces, one for the guides of practice, another for policy and advocacy, the future of design and planning, and continuing my work on equity, diversity, and inclusion. So the first one, the guides for practice, we put together a single source of shared information for architects and architecture firms dealing with COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic. And we did that at the end of March, and then we revised this document in mid-April with additional information on construction and HR resources. So please make sure you can find it in the BSA website. There are resources for COVID-19. That's where our latest information is, and we will continue to update it as we have more information. I've also been working with Jenny and with others on the policy and advocacy task force. So we're working with AIA Massachusetts on city and state level policies regarding shutdowns, construction, projects moving forward. All of this information, again, is evolving and will continue to change. So please check on our website for the latest information on that as well. And then we're also talking to partners in our industry. So we have had several meetings with our association industry partners such as AGC, ULI, ENÉE, ASLA, and many others. And we're identifying opportunities for sharing information and joining forces regarding state and city policies. And then also, I've been working on the task force for the future of design and planning, and we've created 2 buckets for that. One is the future of design and planning, and then the other one is the future of practice. So we have a lot of initiatives going on with that. We'll see how they all continue to evolve. So in the next few weeks, we're planning to host a weekly online forum to connect the membership on topics related to the future of design or how design can transform the built environment post-COVID-19. Every week will be a different topic. We're exploring a platform for this forum right now. I have also had conversations with the college representatives on the board about how to engage students. A lot of the students don't have co-ops because the firms don't have, are not able to continue with having students in the summer based on their workflows. So we have come up with some ideas, and we're in the process of planning a design competition for the students that maybe can engage students and firms together. And another idea is to provide a 1-week externship for students, possibly related to research. So we're looking at all of the implications of students being able to get credits for this work. We're also looking for ways to train students in new software and provide technical courses in sustainability, LEED for the ARE exam, and to help them with developing new skills. We will also are planning to do a Dean's Roundtable with all of the colleges. For the future of practice, we're looking for recent grads and interns under 10 years in the profession. We're putting together virtual coffees for 3 or 4 mentees and 1 or 2 mentors, maybe 2 or 3 of them, so to have some continuity. So it'll be coffee with an architect. So something hopefully will be coming out on that soon. The Emerging Professionals Network is also doing a mentoring program, and they're looking for mentors. We're also looking for opportunities to create a mid-career mentoring program. Women in Design created a very successful one. We'd like to include everyone who is mid-career to apply for that. And then for firm principals, there's a work sharing program. You should receive an email from the BSA, and that information will be vetted by Eric White. And the 4th task force is in January, we created, we've had the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force for 2 years, but in January, we created 2 knowledge communities, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Knowledge Community, and then the LGBTQ community. The LGBTQ community hosted a social hour and will have upcoming events. And the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, we're going to continue the work from the task force. We're working with DCAM, the BSA is working with DCAM. We're working with other industry leaders on the DCAM Affirmative Marketing Program, as the state's new goals are going to be out on July 1st for WBE and MBE, as it is increasing to 21%, 21.7. And in June, we're going to begin programming on the guides for equitable practice again to see how we can start doing it as a virtual program. So stay tuned on that. So that's my update. So now I'd like to turn it over to Ted Touloukian to talk about the BSA Foundation.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric, Jenny, and Natasha. I think each of you summed up so well the great team of people working together to support our membership and our extended design community. It's certainly a reflection of the passion that we all share to collaborate and improve our conditions in this extraordinary time. In our last town hall meeting, I was able to provide an update on how the foundation is evaluating and thinking about new ways of providing design education and design resources for 2 of our key strategic areas, youth and family programs and design work in our communities. Tonight, I'd like to update you on some of the work that we've done since then. At the core of our youth and family design education programs, we have been promoting public understanding and appreciation of architecture and design for K through 12 students and teachers, families, and the general public. We've been serving over 4,000 kids in the last few years alone. And as everyone may have known, this has been relatively hands-on. Certainly now this type of interaction and in-person collaboration just cannot occur the same way. With the continued closing of schools and the extended remote work environments for parents, the needs for youth and family design education support has been evolving. Recently, Foundation Design Director Polly Carpenter has been able to work with the City of Boston, Cambridge, and Medford to provide an online teaching packet for kindergarten students. Our primary focus has been prompted by the question from each of the mayors to the kids. What ideas do they have to make Boston a more fair and interesting place? The packet includes online resources through a multi-day program to help kids brainstorm, draw, and build their ideas with common materials that they have in their homes, with the opportunity to share their vision in a future online virtual gallery that the BSA is developing in the coming weeks. Stay tuned. Additionally, our Community Design Director, Ben Peterson, has been working closely with a great group of committed design professionals and community stakeholders to develop a database and inventory of buildings, facilities, and infrastructures that may be adapted to become alternative care sites in response to the increased COVID-19 demands on area hospitals. In collaboration with over 40 people in the last few weeks that engaged principals and firms to first-year emerging professionals, as well as support from allied software companies such as Autodesk, the BSA assembled 3 working groups to, 1, identify the spatial needs for alternative care sites, evaluate the real estate inventory that could be paired with these needs, and a working group to build a virtual platform that can organize this information as an online resource. Just this past week, through the hard work of many people, the BSA has been able to upload a database with buildings, sites, and properties that can be considered for alternative occupancy. We've been able to open a portal online where people can suggest a building or facility that can be used in alternative needs so that we can continue to grow available options. And also, we've been able to build a dashboard where we can share these tools with other cities and communities so that they too can build a similar resource. What we have been learning is that we can build a process that can respond to today's needs, as well as think ahead to be proactive and more responsive in the future for other pending needs in relation to affordable housing, climate change, and the demand that carbon has on our environment. I'd like to point out that many of these resources were put together and are on our website at architects.org. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jay Wickersham, who's going to provide you an additional update. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks a lot, Ted. This is Jay Wickersham. And so I'm going to give a couple of updates on some of what's been happening in state and city government that directly affect some of the work of BSA members. And these are both subjects where we've gotten a lot of questions. The first, of course, has to do with the shutdown of construction and what's going to happen when it restarts, and in particular, how to assure job site safety in the environment of COVID. As Eric mentioned, the Governor Baker has now extended the statewide shutdown. That is not total, but it does cover most construction projects statewide, and that will extend until May 18th. And as I imagine you're also aware, the cities of Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville have total construction shutdowns in effect. Those are continuing with no fixed date of ending. But what you should be aware of is, at least within Boston, and I expect this may be then adopted by other municipalities as well, the city of Boston has issued draft guidelines for job site safety that will go into effect once construction resumes. Now, I want to underscore, this will be the responsibility of the contractor. And in fact, the city is intending that general contractors will need to sign a certificate verifying that they have, in fact, put in place these job site protections that the guidelines call for. So it's not the architect's direct responsibility, but we all need to be aware of this. And as I said, what is in place in Boston, which is more extensive than the statewide guidelines, I think we may expect that something similar will be picked up elsewhere. And that is available. You can go to the BSA's COVID section of the website, and there is a link to the City of Boston website with this information. The other point I wanted to mention, which Jenny Effron picked up in the very first part of this, has to do with the permitting process. Jenny was talking about how to develop best practices for permitting and public hearings, which are going forward. However, you should be aware that the legislature has passed a law that permits cities and towns to essentially pause all local permitting procedures, including hearings, including deadlines, throughout the declared period of the emergency, and the governor has now continued that through May 18th, and for the most part for a period of up to 45 days afterwards. So that doesn't prevent cities and towns from proceeding, and some are continuing with various permitting procedures and public hearings, but others have not. And in that case, there is a pause. So again, since architects are so often going to be involved in the permitting process of the projects they're involved in, it's important that we all familiarize ourselves with this. This also has a link on the BSA's website, and also if you go to our umbrella organization, AIA Massachusetts, there also is a link there as well and a good summary of the permitting law. So those are two important updates for people to familiarize themselves with. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Eric.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Natasha and Ted and Jenny. And I want to take a moment just to assure you that the BSA remains committed to the design and building industry, and just as important to the communities where we live. And I think you heard some of the work that's going on all those levels. To follow up on Jay's point about job safety, one of the programs that we've been participating in is a collaboration with a number of our partners in the building industry associations. And we have posted on the BSA website the AGC's COVID-19 Safety Response Plan, which is an 88-page document providing best practices and recommendations for safe construction site operations. And there's also an additional 22-page document that has come from the unions. And we'll continue to provide recommendations for safe reopening of offices. A great resource that's come out is from Golston and Stores, the Boston Chamber, Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, and most especially, we encourage people to stay paying attention to the work that's coming out from the CDC on reopening offices in safe manners. Just to share a couple of other things that are happening. Susan couldn't join us tonight, but I want to let you know that the knowledge communities are back and incredibly busy. They're reporting significant increases in participation. And so we encourage all of you to join in and participate in the knowledge communities that you're most interested in. Natasha also mentioned our work with students and young professionals that we're working on at this point. We're also launching a series of professional programs for our professional members. And these include a series of high quality programs around embodied carbon, technology, business, professional business, equity, diversity, inclusion, and much more. And we'll be creating a series of forums that will be happening for firm principals and sole practitioners. Firm principals we are doing a meeting later this week, and sole practitioners at the beginning of next week. And of course, you can stay up to date with all of this information at architects.org/resources that will keep you up to date on all of your interests in COVID. So I want to take the moment now to shift directions and start to respond to some of the questions. And I'm going to open this up back to our panel here. Many of you have sent in questions and comments. And again, just a reminder, if there are questions that you'd like to share during this session, please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat section at the bottom of the screen here. But the first question, actually, it's not exactly a question, but I'm curious what folks are thinking in response to the idea of we can't be the experts of everything. And we can't run around and research all the cleaning products, air filters, and make slapshod recommendations. And I'm curious what folks have as recommendations in response to helping folks with that. Anyone want to jump in on this?
Well, Eric, this is Jay. Maybe I'll sort of take a first pass at that. If I'm understanding this question as having to, there are two different parts to this. One would be kind of temporary measures, probably relating to a construction job site, as opposed to kind of long-term measures having to do with specifications for a project that's going to be built. So I think to the first half of that, I would refer people to the resources you've been talking about, the AGC's, quite exhaustive guidelines about job site safety, as well as some of these other governmental documents that have come out. But also to, for architects not to take too much upon themselves. Job site safety is the contractor's responsibility. It is not the architect's responsibility. We need to be aware of what are best practices, but not to actually sort of overstep ourselves and take on a role that more properly belongs to the contractor, who really has to manage the job site and protect everyone's safety there.
Thank you, Jay. Anything else that anyone would like to add to that?
I think I would just say that we've been partnering with a lot of different organizations, and actually have a weekly call with other building industry collaborators. I think just to both share ideas and thoughts and what we're hearing, and also because we don't have to be the experts in everything, and that's why we have these partnerships, and that's why we can sort of be a knowledge sharing community in addition to the own knowledge that architects and people in the AC community bring, that we have access to a lot of partners to be able to also gain knowledge and share knowledge of others.
Another question, and I think I want to direct this to Ted and Natasha first, and then Jay and Jenny, if you want to weigh in. Is the way that we work right now going to establish a different way of working in the future? And will there be a new definition for remote working? And I'm curious, Jay, or Ted and Natasha, what are your thoughts on that?
I think absolutely. I think that people are going to find that there are different ways of working remotely and working together in person that will work better for their firms. I also think a lot of firms and developers have been putting out guidelines for how this could possibly move forward. And this is one of the conversations that we want to have on our forum, because even if you go back to work, for many years, we have been kind of jam-packing people into offices and even open work areas. And I think that with this social distancing, even though the spaces will be laid out differently, I don't think that offices will necessarily be smaller because of that. So I think it will just have a different way of laying themselves out so that people can feel comfortable with social distancing, but also be able to collaborate.
I'd like to add to Natasha's point, this idea of how we work today and how we work in the future is, particularly in the future, is relatively unknown. But I think we can all agree that we're learning new ways of working together. And at the core of our profession is collaboration and ultimately how we communicate with each other. And I think we're all seeing this as an opportunity to invest in new tools that can expand the way that we are communicating with our clients, our allied professionals, the engineers or construction partners, but also, more importantly, how we're reaching our own fellow coworkers. And speaking with other professionals, there's a great opportunity for us to use these new tools as a creative process and expand our network and expand our creative process. So I'm pretty excited about what the future holds for us.
Next question, and I might start with Jenny on this, since Ben is not able to join us today. Can we create opportunities to be involved in a common cause to deal with this crisis?
So I think that some of the things, particularly when Ted was talking about Ben Peterson's work in the alternative care sites, that project was certainly a collaborative across industry collaboration with people in the commercial real estate section, obviously in healthcare and others. And so I think that that represents one really strong opportunity where we could all come together. And then I think also the work on public meetings really, I think that collecting those case studies is something that's important right now, but will be something that is important for the foreseeable future as we struggle, I think, to join as large groups in public. But then also beyond that, I think that some of these things can really stretch beyond design review meetings and can really get to public participation, which is important across sectors. So I think that those are two really good examples of work that I think that we are already involved in that will continue to sort of be a common cause that can help everybody.
I think, Eric, can I add to that?
Yeah.
I think the current situation has connected us to industry partners where we are making really kind of strong relationships that can grow into other things. And so I'm very optimistic that working with all of those industry groups and our peers of engineers and landscape architects and real estate developers and all of that can create just a stronger bond in moving forward that may not have been as available if we weren't going through these things together.
You know, a common cause is when you have a period of change like this, it really puts people in a place that we need to work together. And one of the strengths of our profession has been how we add value. And uniquely, the status quo of design problems has changed so dramatically. This is a common opportunity for us to put our resources and our thinking together to reinvent new ways that buildings can be designed, or what types of programs that may be best suited for projects. But the opportunity commonly to think about value propositions is really on the forefront of projects today.
It's also a good way to connect with the emerging professionals and with the students. And this is also another venue that may not have been as virtually accessible before this happened, where we can start making sure that we can engage them in the profession and in the value of what we do, and make sure that they remain in the profession and kind of be engaged in the next phase of it.
Eric, and if I could maybe add to this too, and I want to pick up on what Natasha was talking about, which is one of the other task forces, the one looking at the future of design and planning. You know, in this crisis, there are also extraordinary new opportunities to rethink not just buildings and spaces, but our entire cities. You know, New York City has now closed 1,000 miles of its streets to cars. Cities all across the country are rethinking transportation and the nature of streets and public spaces. And there's actually quite an extraordinary opportunity here in the Boston region for us to do the same, and for the BSA with our partners to really be at the forefront of rethinking how we use and get around and inhabit the entire city.
I think that's an excellent point, and something that this is an opportunity in addition to all of the challenges and tragedies that we're facing, but it is an opportunity to look at how we rethink the city and how we live together. Jay, I might bounce this back to you, or at least to start. Even if construction starts up in the next month, there's no guarantee that we will not get shut down again. How do we plan for that construction schedule?
Yeah, Eric, that's a great question, and I think that that's something that we're going to be having to kind of think about in a practical way, but also in a sense of contracts and fees and kind of the business of architecture, that I expect we're going to be seeing contracts will have to have more uncertainties built into them. It will probably be particularly driven by the contractors because they're the ones who have kind of the biggest financial stake in this, and by the owners, but architects as well You know, for the foreseeable future, I think that comment is exactly correct. One cannot assume that projects will from now on have an unbroken period of construction from start to finish. We have to be prepared for stopping and starting, and how we build that into our business models as well as our practices.
Yeah, just to add to Jay's point, I think the question's excellent, but it underscores the major principle of our time, which is that we need to plan for change. And in each aspect of the profession, being construction or planning or internal design working with your staff, or potentially even community design, more than ever, we have to be adaptable in the way that we look at how we're solving problems and how that we're communicating. And I think that everyone is going to be tasked with that challenge. And the best way we can prepare for it is really to just prepare for change.
And I think this this next question actually ties into that. And Ted and Natasha, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this. The creative process is now challenged in isolation. How can we continue to improve that process?
I mean, in general, to tell you the truth, I just saw an architectural record, different ways of making masks that Harvard is making them based on origami. I think we never stop being creative. I think we look for opportunities, and the more constraints and the more challenges that we have, the better the products that we make. So I think we're problem solvers and we're creative thinkers. And I don't think that the current situation is going to affect or change that. I think it'll make us think about things in a different way, and we need to kind of transform ourselves into opportunities for what's coming ahead and what lies ahead.
You know, Eric, this is another great question, because it's a very personal question to each of us. You know, what isolation means and how we want to respond to it. But in all of it, it kind of goes back to the theme of communication and looking at new methods about how we're communicating with each other. So again, opportunity is presented with creativity, and it is challenged in isolation, but I think it causes each of us to adapt to new methods of working, and from that, the creative process, I believe, will truly flourish.
I think in general, I'm going to pick up with something that Ted said, which was about communication. I think in general, we are thinking about different way, what sizes of meetings and groups and gatherings are meaningful, right, to be collaborative. And I've been in different types of Zoom meetings where it ranges, you know, from a global workshop at DCAM with 50 people to smaller, the smaller meetings of 4 or 5 people, that each of them have a different value. And I remember from the Women's Leadership Summit this past year, Priya Parker, this woman was one of our speakers, wrote a book on meaningful gatherings. And I'm wondering how it is going to continue to evolve, these meaningful virtual gatherings. And what sizes of gatherings are meaningful, and which ones are the best for collaboration. And we're going to test it out with these virtual coffees and all of these pieces. So I think connecting and communicating in a different way is the wave of the future. And I think we need to test it in all different ranges.
I agree. You know, I think there's a whole series of questions, and I think these are really the challenging questions, and I don't know that we'll have necessarily answers, but I want to put them out to you, that they all have to deal with the foreseeable future and the economic challenges that are going to be there, and everything from how will architecture and design firms weather a likely or potential significant recession, to will I have work, to, as an owner, we are trying to keep all our projects moving, but we also don't want to put anyone at undue risk or concerns. and that employment is one of the things that most employees are worried about right now. I'm wondering, realizing that as we said in the beginning, that we won't necessarily have all the answers, but what advice will you be giving to folks on this, and thoughts that you have to help get through this?
I mean, I think in general, everyone has to be mindful of their cash flow, and they really need to think about the future of their firm. Again, this is an unprecedented time. I'm not an economist, but I just feel like in general, everyone has to find creative ways of continuing. Some firms are very, very busy with design. And there's this work sharing opportunity where we can keep people in the profession. One of the biggest concerns that I have is that the 2008-2009 happens again, where we have people leave the profession, and I mean, it goes across the board, but it really impacts minorities and women in the profession, especially. We saw a huge decline in that time, and just people leaving the profession to go to other professions. So how do we not have this gap of talent leaving the profession? How do we keep these projects moving forward in creative ways to make sure that we can keep everyone, as many people employed as we can? And so I think the work sharing is a good opportunity, as everything ebbs and flows with uncertainty. But we have to kind of really be creative, maybe about even our scope of work. And when Jay was president, I worked on the Now Practice Now task force with him, and we were trying to find, kind of the niches of where our work is really going. And I think this is a time where we really need to be creative about that.
Yeah, I can maybe, I'll sort of pick up on that. And Natasha, that was, I think, a great example of a lot of energy within the BSA, which has continued on in thinking about, alternative models of practice. There's not just one model of how to be an architect or how to be an architecture firm. The models are multiplying already. We've now kind of multiplied things with all of the different configurations of virtual working and virtual networking. And I would expect that the firms and individuals who will be successful are going to continue to be creative. I mean, I think one of the great things about architects is they're imaginative, not just about what they're designing, but even about kind of redesigning their practices. And that's going to be a real necessity now. And I think architects who can be imaginative about how to use these skills and to find areas that aren't perhaps conventionally what architects have done are going to, I think, be well served in this uncertainty.
Ted, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
In summary, these are great points around being mindful of how businesses are being run, particularly being careful about not creating a gap in the profession, looking at alternative methods. So all this, I think, points to that harnessing our skills in our profession, our creative skills, and moving into a place of thinking about how we can create opportunity, not just create opportunity for our own firms, but create opportunity for great diversity of people that we want to retain in the practice, create opportunity for our clients and allow them to reimagine places of work and even places of how we live and work together, which is very interesting. But all together, it's really, it points to potentially a new direction for the profession. And if we're going to move through this, it goes back to an original, kind of earlier point that I have, that we're going to have to adapt. We have to plan for change. And those who plan for change and are able to adapt are really going to be successful.
I think the one thing that I would add in a conversation that I heard recently is, I think that that we are going to be facing some challenges ahead, and we're not alone in that. There really virtually everyone that's out there is going to be facing a lot of these challenges, and that one of the opportunities from this is to really focus on building relationships in addition to that adapting. It's an opportunity to reach out to people, and that that there are going to be a lot of people going through the exact same thing that you are. And I think the BSA is really committed to trying to help build those connections and to help people through this as best as we can. We're not in a position, unfortunately, to be able to offer the work, but we can help build some of the skills and build some of the opportunities to connect with folks through this. I want to ask, I think this is a question that is on the minds of many out there, and sort of to change gears a little bit. And that question is, I want to hear how working families with 2 working parents are supposed to carry the burden of childcare and work full time without the support of an extended family or childcare centers and providers. That's a huge question that I know a lot of people are facing, and not just those with children, but those that are also taking care of parents. And I'll also just add to this question, you know, any suggestions for those who are isolated and alone. So maybe just to put it out to the panel, recommendations first for if you are working with either children or parents, any thoughts that you have on how to manage that process and getting through that?
I think, and Eric, you would know better, but I think that Polly and the BSA had put together some kits for parents and kids that are on the website under the COVID-19 resources for them to do that work. I think it's challenging when you have 2 parents working with especially young children, and I don't have any solutions per se for it, but I think people have, I think firm owners really have to be sensitive that it's a very challenging environment to work in, and to give flexibility of time so that maybe in the evenings people can work more, or they can shift their schedule to be able to both parent and have a balance and be able to work. But the other piece, which is people that are living alone, I'm encouraging people to connect with the knowledge communities. I know some of them do some social programming. I know the emerging practice group does, the LGBTQ community does, women in design do. So there are many, many groups where you can find peers that have similar interests, or that you can develop these new networks and opportunities. So I think that, and then the other piece is, I think that some of the, I just received an email from my healthcare provider. They're providing wellness, health, mental wellness seminars. Blue Cross Blue Shield so happens to be mine, that are targeted for this specific concern of people finding ways and outlets of feeling connected to others when they're living on their own.
No, this new way of working and living together is certainly putting stresses on families, on individuals, on employers. And at the core of this, there really is the need for flexibility and being respectful. And it works best as a reciprocal model where, you know, employers need to understand the needs of the people that work for them, providing opportunities that allow for their families to really work, you know, best in those environments. And those are different for everyone. And certainly there's the needs of the employers and the jobs that they have to run. But ultimately, for this to really work, is that all groups need to be flexible, and they need to be respectful, and they need to communicate so that we can all work together and still find a way to support each other.
One way that we've had some success is we meet every morning at 9 a.m. as a group, and we kind of set expectations for the day so that then people within their schedules we can have expectations met within a certain amount of time, then they're realistic, understanding what their work, and then we touch base right after lunch, and then if we need be at the end of the day, just to see where everyone is. And so I think I agree with Ted. I think communication is the key. It works differently for everyone, but I think more communication is better than not, just to be able to understand how when people can actually do the work, and what their schedules really allow, so that you can work on your look at the firm holistically and look at the workflow.
Well, I'm curious, well, and any other recommendations that folks have there?
I think that, so I am in that situation of 2 young children at home, 2 working parents, and that definitely the, flexibility in schedules, and sort of flexibility on both ends. And then I think also just recognizing that it's hard for everyone, and that it's not, sometimes it feels, like, oh, like everyone else is managing this, or someone has this assistance or not, or, and I think that just knowing that it's hard for everybody, and everybody sort of being able to be honest that this is a really difficult situation and support each other. And I think that everybody probably has up and down days or weeks, and that we all just have to be a little kinder and a little more understanding of that from everybody. That I think that that goes a really long way, and to look at the broader picture of things that we will get out of this. And so, to try as hard as we can to just be understanding of ourselves and each other in this time is helpful.
Yeah, this is Jay. I would actually say that one of the things that's been a pleasant surprise has actually been many of the sort of professional interactions that I've had. Often, as a lawyer, often with ones that are might be a rather hard-fought negotiation with someone on the other side. There's actually been this kind of degree of civility, and people asking about one another, and finding out more about the lives of the people I'm interacting with than I ever had before. Often because, of course, we're on these Zoom calls, and I get to see what's on the other person's walls, and they can see what's on mine. And maybe it's temporary, maybe that, but I want to hope not. I want to hope that maybe we can hold on to some of this awareness of the fullness of our lives within which work is embedded.
I can't agree with you more. I think that this is an important time to be able to share with each other, and to hear from each other, and on that note, I really want to thank all of you, and thank you for joining, all of you out there who joined us today. Please feel free to share your feedback at communications@architects.org. You can stay up to date on our latest news at architects.org, and also through Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and of course by signing up for our weekly e-newsletter, Currents, which is actually now coming out twice a week. We hope some of you may join us on Thursday morning or Friday at noon, Thursday morning at 8 o'clock for our next town meetings, and at our other programs. And before I go, I just want to take a moment to publicly thank all my colleagues on staff. Like you, we are in a new world of operating, and they've been working incredibly hard to build the new internal systems and to provide these resources to all of you. And finally, please join me in thanking Natasha Espada AIA, Ted Touloukian AIA, Jay Wickersham FAIA, and Jenny Effron for joining us today. We know that your lives have been turned upside down, and we truly appreciate your willingness to take the time to share your knowledge, and we thank you for what you do and for doing it so well. And as a reminder to all of you, please be safe, be healthy, and be kind. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.